Welcome to Reselling Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 377, a post-Christmas episode.
That's right, man. You almost went in a time machine there and went to the past, which is pretty crazy.
Time has flown by, though.
That it has. We are on episode 377, which is pretty crazy. And yeah, Orlando said it's a post-Christmas episode. So it's kind of, Christmas fell in a weird time this year as far as like episodes dropping. Sometimes there's like a clear, like this episode is our Christmas episode, but like there was like one right before Christmas and then one right after Christmas. So which one is our Christmas episode? I don't know. It's Christmas is over, so probably the last one. But yeah, we're on Christmas week here. And yeah, we're really excited to kind of wrap up. This is going to be our last episode of the 2023 year. And then we're moving into 2024. Our next Monday mini-sode is going to be on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. I'm sorry. And then we have 2024 ahead of us. So what we kind of wanted to do was kind of look back at 2023 and kind of talk about what our highlights were reselling wise and kind of go from there just to reflect and kind of enjoy some of the fruits of our labors as far as that goes. And then kind of look forward into what's going to be happening in our next year. So how about you, Orlando? What's been some of your favorite happenings in 2023?
So it's good to do this because, you know, things have been kind of rough. And we'll talk about in the update episode how Q4, there was an uptick and there was some sunshine. It just was cloudy with sunshine. But, you know, there's a lot of great moments this last year. And one of the things I learned was that there's always opportunity. There's always opportunity. And it first happened earlier in the year. I went to this community garage sale and I remember there was this big Indiana Jones thing. It was like 3 feet tall. It was from Comic-Con. Comic-Con is like the huge convention that we have here in San Diego. I mean, they have other ones throughout the world, but the one in San Diego is like a really big deal. And items from Comic-Con are super collectible. And I remember looking at it and I was like, I should look that up. But I'm like, nah, there's no way somebody's going to put something that's worth something out. So I didn't even look it up. And, you know, it's the worst feeling when a second later you're like, you know what, I should go check. And then somebody already else is already on it, right? Mm-hmm. They already have their phone out. They're looking. And I remember asking the lady, I'm like, hey, so are you going to pick that up? She's like, probably. And I was like, I just want to know if she's just was looking at it. And, you know, I did the whole fake looking at other items around, you know, waiting for her to just walk away from it. And yeah, it never happened. So I ended up looking it up. It was $10 and it was worth $300 to $500. And so I was like, oh, I hate this. Like, I guess my whole morning is doomed. Right. And so I kind of had that mentality that things were going to be horrible. And I still scored that morning, but I had the same scenario the next week. And I shared this, I don't know how many podcasts ago, whenever this happened. But I went to this other garage sale and I was there early. Now, the problem with this garage sale is I couldn't find the driveway. Like I kept driving everywhere and it was upon a hill and you kind of had to go 2 streets down and make a right and enter this driveway and it would lead you up there. And I got there and there was somebody already there and I wanted to be the first person there. So I show up and I see these huge blue bins and in the blue bins, there's a bunch of Griswold pans, not Griswold like National Lampoons, Griswold like vintage, good money pans. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Like I failed last week, but I'm going to score here. And I start going through them and I hear this voice in the back going, yeah, hey, I already picked those up. Those are mine right there. And I'm like, what? Really? Again? We're dealing with this? So then I'm like, all right, there's something else here. So I go around, I pick up a Harley seat. It's, you know, it's worth something, but Harley seats are hard to sell these days. And then I find this huge tub of Hummel figurines. Now, Hummel figurines are good money. They take a little bit longer to sell, but if you get the right ones, like, you know, you could pick them up for like $5-10, sell it for $100 to $200, maybe more. And there was a whole clear plastic bin. And so the lady who I thought was the owner of the place put them up on a table. And, you know, I thought she was just getting them out of the garage. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, hey, how much do you want for all this? And what do I hear right to my right side? Oh, I'm buying these. Actually, she brought them out for me to look through them before I finally pay for them. I'm like, what? Again? And that was probably, the Griswold pans were probably $1 to $2K in profit. These were probably, I don't know, $1K in profit. I'm like, I'm just getting slammed. So then I ended up, leaving, and I've mentioned this story before where I went to this garage sale, and it was the second week of the garage sale. Now, this could be my number one. These aren't in no particular order. There's no like grand finale here because this could be my number one, but it just depends what you find important. And you know where I'm leaning with this. So I go to the second garage sale, and I show up, and there's some vintage Halloween signs. I'm like, that's cool. The guy has a bunch of vintage Halloween stuff. And then I see this box of vintage toys, and I'm like, how much were these? And he's like, $20. And I didn't actually know what I had. I knew there was a bunch of vintage toys from the 80s. I looked some of them up, but I didn't know what I had. And then, I'm walking around, and I see this guy buy a bunch of vintage Nintendo games. And it was you can tell it was a reseller because the guy's like, hey, I'll do 50. And the guy's like, these aren't worth that much. These are worth maybe 40. Could you do, 30? And I'm like, oh, I missed out again. So I just kept getting slammed, and I kept getting slammed. And so as I'm walking around, I see this guy going through these old vintage Game Boy Advance games. And he's going through them, and, he's taking them, he's putting them in a trash bag. Just putting them in a trash bag, looking, there's nothing put in a trash bag. And I see them, and I'm like, I know those are worth something. I'm going to see if he just ends up throwing them all away. And sure enough, he ends up putting them all in the trash. And in Spanish, I go to him, I'm like, hey, you don't want those? And he's like, nah, they're not worth anything. There's no games in there. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. So I look in the trash bag, and I look some of them up, and all I needed to look is one of the Pokemon boxes. It was a Pokemon Advance. I forget which one, Game Boy Advance. I forget which one it was, but the box was worth $300 to $400 just for the box. So I'm like, what is going on here? So I'm like, all right, I'm getting these boxes, right? So it was about 20 to 25 boxes, and they were going to go in the trash. So they were free. What I find out later was that the guy that was looking through them wasn't a reseller. He was just an employee that the guy had hired to organize items for him. And so what ended up happening is I got the trash bag, and I put it aside. I already had the vintage toys. And then I started looking around, and I moved some other items. And underneath, there was an N64, a Super Nintendo, controllers for an N64, a PlayStation 3, Super Mario All-Stars, like all these Super Nintendo games that no one had, I guess, looked. They were underneath a bunch of like Halloween items. And I'm like, all right, this is crazy. I am not leaving this garage sale. So then I kept looking around, and I saw like these books that were like in Japanese. They had some graphics on them, and I know a little bit about manga, but I didn't know what I had. And I remember looking up one or two books, and I was like, yeah, I'm probably not going to pick these up. And I saw a bunch of resellers pick them up and put them down, pick them up and put them down. So I'm like, they're probably not worth anything. But then I'm like, you know what? Maybe there are some that are worth. And so what really caught my eye is I found this collection of One Piece manga, and it was the golden foil version, which means it's like there's like this like gold bronze like bottom part of the cover, and those could be good money. And when I looked, they were first edition, so I looked them up, and people were selling like the set of books for like $500. So I ended up going like on this huge leap because I was like, you know what? I'm not going to leave this garage sale because obviously there's a ton of good stuff here and people are missing out. So I spent 3 hours at this garage sale, and I allotted everything up, and I bought every single piece of manga. I didn't even know what they were worth, but I picked up every single piece of manga. He also had Hardy Boys. He also had a bunch of other like Polly Pocket vintage toy, like you name it. Like it was like everything that was trapped in the late 90s, 2000s was at this garage sale. And I asked the guy, I said, hey, so are you a reseller? He's like, no, my daughter really loved this stuff, and I just, whatever she wanted, I just bought it for her. And I was like, what? So this isn't even like reselling stuff, because I thought it was one of those, people that do the swap meet when they do garage sales. It looks, what it looks like. It's like those bins with the flaps, right, all over the place. That's kind of what it was. Well, in the end, I ended up making a deal for everything, and I paid $180 for everything. The Game Boy Advance boxes were free. Okay, so I paid $180 for probably, I want to say I bought like 500 to 600 books in total, manga books. Okay, I bought like a vintage Chucky doll. I bought vintage video games. I bought vintage toys. And right away, and as you guys that have been listening to podcasts for a long time, I had sold all the Game Boy Advance boxes, at least all of them. I think I sold like 90% of them within 2 weeks for 2K. So I made the 190 into 2K within 2 weeks. And then with the manga books, I probably made another 1K to 2K on just the manga books. Then on the vintage toys, I made like another 500 to 600. And I still have probably about 30% of that haul that hasn't sold yet that's listed. And then I have another 10% that I still haven't listed. Like I haven't listed the N64, Super Nintendo, some of the games. So what was the whole moral of the story was that there's always opportunity around the corner. I could have gone home after that first one going, man, I missed out on 3K. I'm done for the day. I don't want to do this anymore. But all I had to do, I literally drove a mile and a half and I ended up scoring far more than I could have at the other garage sale because those Hummel things, those would have taken a long time and maybe would not even have sold by the time of this podcast because this was back in, I think this was like in August. And then the Grizzle pans, those probably would have sold. But man, those Game Boy Advance games, and they weren't even games, they're just boxes and manuals. That's all they were. I had Pokemon Emerald, Pokemon Sapphire, all of those boxes just instantly, like within days would sell. So anyways, that was one of the best moments of 2023 for me. All right, I know that was kind of long-winded. How about you, Mike?
Nice, man. Yeah, you scored too on the timing wise, especially with the. Oh wait, hold on.
So Mike,
sorry about that. I was muted. So
right.
I had something fall in my garage, so I had to go check that out earlier. Okay. So anyways, you scored on the manga, especially that One Piece because the movie had just released on Netflix for One Piece too. So that was good timing. And One Piece obviously is one of the most popular anime series of all time. So no matter what, you're going to do well there. But timing was really, really good for that. So for me, man, 2023 was just a wild year. It's probably going to go down in the history books for me as one of the biggest years of my life. So we not just reselling, but just in general. So we had our third son. He was in the NICU for a while. So that was kind of a hectic, crazy time. Luckily, I was able to, slow reselling down a little bit. The beauty of reselling is you can kind of speed up, ramp it up as necessary, slow it down as you need to. So, but I had my son, we bought a house, we moved across the country, we kept the podcast going, we switched the whole style of the podcast. So it was kind of a crazy, hectic year for me. And it's kind of weird that it's wrapping up. It's coming to an end because it's a lot of the things I've been talking about for years has finally come to fruition. And it's just weird to see it all happen. And one of the cool things that happened during our move, I was able to kind of purge a lot of inventory and sell off a lot of the big stuff that we had. Like I remember right before we moved, I sold like kayak, I sold horse panels, I sold all kinds of stuff that was just sitting around, taking up tons of space. As a reseller that's a part-time reseller, I like having inventory, but I like my inventory being like manageable and not just like my whole house, my whole yard just being full of stuff that's for sale, because then it becomes more of your life, right? And I want reselling to add to my life. I don't want it to be my entire life. So being able to kind of purge a lot of the things, I went to some swap meets, sold off a lot of inventory there. I donated some inventory, unlisted some stuff, and kind of was able to just bring the things that were, I feel like, the most valuable and the stuff that was actually most portable. And by doing that, I learned a lot. It was kind of cathartic to realize like, okay, these things were mistakes. These things were good hauls, but times have changed. These things are still great. I'm kind of moving more towards this, so just kind of taking that time to reflect and go through my inventory, basically piece by piece, figure out what needs to be there, what doesn't need to be there, really allowed me to kind of sharpen what it is I want to do going forward, what types of items I want to be picking up, what types of things I want to do, and even the type of selling I'm doing. I really enjoy doing big items locally, but again, there's the issue of, the timing and meeting up with people and all of that. So kind of just really figuring out through the process of the move, like what is profitable for me? What's a good use of my time? What do I enjoy doing? What were some of the mistakes that I've learned? Because a lot of times you can make mistakes. And if you're a smart reseller, you're going to learn from those mistakes. You'll be like, oh yeah, I don't want to pick up that thing again. But unless you actually take the time to kind of go through a lot of your inventory, you might not really be thinking about all of the things you need to change. Because I looked at some of my stuff, then I'm like, man, I bought this year 1, and then I bought this year 2, and I bought this year 3. And had I really learned the lesson in year one, I wouldn't have been buying it again year two. Or year three. So it was kind of a good cathartic experience for me, kind of a good learning experience to do that move. And in some ways, almost like a fresh start. I'm still in the process of really figuring out what reselling looks like here, getting my spaces in order, kind of saving up to get things like a nicer air conditioner put into my garage and all of that. But it was a great experience. I did it. I was able to move pretty much across the country with my inventory. And that has been one of my biggest fears with reselling. And I'm sure you've kind of thought the same, is you're kind of stuck. I mean, you end up getting so much stuff. Reselling is a hard thing to get out of. If you're like, I'm done reselling, unless you just fire sell all your stuff. But then there's also just kind of that fear of like, well, how do I move all this inventory? And you've done it before, you moved across town, but
it was miserable. Yes.
It's miserable, but a cross country move. I mean, it's doable. And so it definitely gave me some confidence there. Yeah. So I'd say that's probably one of my big moments, is just the process of the move and all I learned through it.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because you learn a lot when you move. You learn about what you shouldn't have picked up. You learn about what you want to sell. You want to learn about, how you want to get things set up. It's kind of a reset, so I appreciate you sharing that. And the fact that the fact that we're still moving along and we're still dropping episodes, even after Christmas. It is December 26th. Today while we're recording this. So, we didn't record this ahead of time, and we're able to do that because, that's one of the things with reselling. It forces you to adapt, right? To make things happen. And kind of, I see that with the podcast. So kind of going back with the same theme I had before about there's always opportunity. Part of that is there's so much out there. There's so much out there. Like you might miss out on something, but something else is around the corner, or, you see a reseller and they tell you that, hey, I buy this all the time to resell, but I really don't care about these items. And that happened to me, actually. I ended up going to a community garage sale, and it was kind of a rough morning. And I see this as one of the more memorable moments, because it reminded me of the idea that, in reselling, everybody gets so competitive. Like no one wants to share. We get people that tell us all the time, that the whole reselling market has collapsed because of our podcast, even though we're not that big, or because of other YouTubers. But the reality is there's so much out there. And I remember going to a community garage sale, and our good friend Matt of the podcast, who we've seen multiple times, you've seen him too, here in San Diego when you're here. He was going to a bunch of community garage sales. I was going to a bunch of community garage sales. And I remember his truck was full. And he was leaving the garage sale, and I looked at him. I'm like, well, I guess I don't even need to go to this garage. So I was like, no, you should go. There's a whole bunch of ink there. I really don't care about that stuff, but you should go take a look. I was like, really? Are you sure? He's like, no, I don't like dealing with that stuff. And he hooked it up. And so I went over there, and there are probably, I want to say 40 boxes of toner that were there. And I asked the lady, I'm like, where are these from? She's like, oh, they're from my, our business. We closed it down. I just want to get rid of them. They also had a bunch of vintage kids DVDs. I think they were like Bible stories or something, but they were ones that weren't in circulation. And so whenever you find those, you should always look those up. Whether it be Barney or whether it be, I don't know, whatever it is, you should look it up. You should look it up. And so I started looking it up, and I looked at all the ink toner, and I checked out everything that was there, and I asked her how much, and she's like, you know what? Take it all for $8. And I was like, $8? I was like, okay. And what about, these DVDs over here? She's like, how much you want to pay more? And I was like, you know what? Let's do $5. So I ended up paying in total. I think I added one more dollar. I think in total it was about $14. Well, with toner, I don't know if you guys know, but if you find toner, there are people that drop ship them, and so they'll buy them right away. Like you'll list it, and they'll buy it right away because there are people that they already have looking for that toner, so they connect them to those people. Or you get businesses that they make their money selling toner for a little bit more. They're like drop shippers, but they're not. They buy it from you, and then they'll resell it for like $5-10 more. But they do that in mass quantity, and so they'll offer you a pretty decent price. They're gonna not offer you the top of the market, but they're gonna offer you just a little bit above the bottom of the market. And so I instantly, I turned $13-14 into $1,000 within a couple weeks. And it was a reminder to me that, even though a reseller has gone to an area, that doesn't mean there's nothing to find. And I can tell you story after story this year of that situation happening where I went somewhere and either a reseller missed it, or a reseller who's a friend of the podcast was like, hey, listen, there's stuff I know that you and Mike source. I don't care for that stuff, but you can go look. Or I've had people hit me up and say, hey, Orlando, here's some Harley stuff, which I don't tell anymore that much. But here's some vintage toys. I've done it myself. There's people I know in San Diego that I'll say, hey, over here, there's some golf clubs, or over here, there's some books. And in the end, there's plenty of opportunity out there. So that was a good reminder. I mean, this was, earlier in the year, and so it kind of set the tone for the rest of the year that even though, I might strike out at the first stop or the second stop, or I might go somewhere and there's a bunch of resellers, that doesn't mean there aren't items there for me to find to make good money. Hey, before we move on though, we're almost into 2024, right? And a lot of you are thinking like, man, I didn't do any bookkeeping all year. I enjoy the profits of reselling. I'm kind of worried. You guys, are like, hey, it doesn't matter to me whether it's $600 threshold or it's a 10K threshold. I want to make sure I'm doing what's right. And the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, as someone who hates bookkeeping, is using My Reseller Genie. My Reseller Genie makes things that are very complicated very simple. You don't have to deal with Excel spreadsheets. You put in your information, it imports everything from eBay, so it'll import all your 2023 info. And by the time taxes are ready to roll around, the amount of work you're going to have to do to get ready will not be as overwhelming as you think it is. And so if you haven't checked out My Reseller Genie, go to our link below and use our code PureHustle, and you'll get 15% off the first month, and it'll help you start off 2024 with less stress. All right, what do you got, Mike?
Yeah. All right, so my next one is kind of going along with the idea of moving. Is once I moved, I was kind of introduced finally to the bins. So bins are something that we've talked about a ton on the podcast. You've like gone a couple of times to the one in San Diego. Terrible. I never went. And, it's one of those things where when you're on social media for resellers and you just see so many people who do really well at bins. You see the videos of people at bins, you see the chaos, you see great scores. And it was just something I've always wanted to try. And now I live close enough to the bins, and like I said, it's on my way home from work, so it's a really easy, quick stop for me. I have really enjoyed kind of being pushed out of my comfort zone a little bit. I love garage sales. Thrift stores are fine for me, like normal thrift stores. I like kind of browsing them. Garage sales are my favorite. I love doing local deals because I get to just kind of browse for the things I want to browse for. But man, the bins is like a different animal. And so I wouldn't say that I've completely changed my style of sourcing. I'm not 100% a bin guy yet. I'm still not buying tons of clothes at the bins, mostly because I don't know. I don't know enough of the brands. I'm kind of learning some fabrics a little bit more and what's quality. Sometimes that's more important than the brand even, is just like looking for quality clothes. But I'm doing actually pretty well on the hard goods at the bins. There's fewer of the bins out. So when we say bins, we're talking about like Goodwill outlets, and they bring out these big giant blue bins, and the ones that are the hard goods stuff, there's fewer of them out than there are the clothes section. The clothes section where I'm at just takes up the whole middle of this building, and then kind of around the outskirts are the hard goods. And so I can quickly go through those, find the stuff that's profitable. And because you're paying by weight, I mean, there's times you're just getting crazy killer deals, especially if you get small things that are profitable. It's hard to beat that. I mean, you could beat it at garage sale prices when you're bundling things, making good deals, but depending on what you're picking up, if it's light stuff, man, you're really crushing it. So it's been neat kind of going outside of my comfort zone, trying something new. And it can't hurt you as a reseller to expand your knowledge, to expand the different types of sourcing you do. And it's just good to have that now in my back pocket as another place I can go and source something that's teaching me. And then now, even when I go to garage sales, I'm going to have a little bit more knowledge about clothing because I've spent a little bit more time in clothing there. And as I want to learn more, it's just a great tool for me. So I've been profitable there. It's been fun. I'm glad that it opened back up like right after I moved. I was a little bit bummed when I first got here that it has closed down for renovations, but man, they're making it look nice, and it's back open, and it's been profitable. So Yeah, one of these days, Rolando, I'm gonna have to get you out here to Central Texas, and you'll have to check out the bins.
No, I would love to go to the bins out there. I'm not a fan of the bins here. Like I said, it's kind of like super organized. There's like families or whatever it is. You got to get in and you got to do a lottery. But yeah, listen, if I again, I'm a big fan of people on Whatnot if they buy from the bin. And the fan, and what I mean by fan is I'm a big fan of individuals that go to the bins and they make a profit on Whatnot. I'm not a big fan of people that sell the stuff that they can't sell on their eBay store or whatnot. Like I think that's kind of messed up. But yeah, I think the bins bring so much opportunity. And I know the bins have changed a lot over the years. There used to be people that I knew that would go to the bins back in the day and like it was ghost town. Like no one would go to the bins. And I'm sure now it's a free for all, even where you're at, Mike. But there's so much opportunity there. And so, I keep going with opportunity, but I wanted to switch things up a little bit here because, I would say probably the top or pretty close to the top highlight wasn't about the profit, wasn't about what I made, but was connecting with other resellers. And so, I ended up, I got messaged by Latin Pickers. I hadn't talked to them for a long time. And we just get busy. Life gets busy. There's people you haven't talked to in a while. I mean, if Mike and I weren't doing this podcast, maybe Mike and I wouldn't be talking for a long time. Not that we're not good friends. It's just life happens, right? You have kids, your business grows, you're in a different community and things happen. And so Latin Pickers and I had kind of been disconnected for a while. We hung out a lot pre the situation of 2020. And then we connected one more time, and after that, we kind of ended up in our own zone, and they hit me up and they're like, "Hey, Orlando, we have a bunch of clothing that we sourced back in like 2017, 2018, 2019, and we don't really sell clothes. We're booksellers, and we don't want to deal with having to take pictures and do measurements and all this. Do you want to stop by?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll come by." And so it came by, and yes, the haul was great. Okay, I ended up 4xing, 5xing. There was a bunch of vintage clothing on there. It was they know what they're talking about. Like they are, I would say, all around resellers. Like they deal with books, but they're strong at the video games. They're strong at clothing. They're pretty much, they have an eye for pretty much anything. And so, when I met up with Christian Adam, I ended up saying, "Hey, can I take a tour of your warehouse, because I'm pretty sure things have changed." And the conversation was great because I had really wondered how other resellers are doing, right? We talk about how we're doing. We talk about what we hear on social media and what people DM us. But, to actually talk to other reseller and see what they're going through, it's not very often. I mean, I do talk to, a lot of people that are on YouTube and, we exchange text sometimes when we talk on the phone, and I see how they're doing. But, actually going to their place where they're reselling. And we had this conversation about, in 2020 when things went down, one of the things we decided was like we weren't going to take the PPP loan, right? And part of it was, we were doing all right. We didn't, we kind of didn't want to put ourselves in a situation where, if things go south, we have to pay it back, or the government's looking into how many employees we have and all that, and we were just like, we don't want to mess with it. Things were good, and so we didn't. But I wondered, like, because I kind of have some regrets that I didn't take that loan, just because I think I could have leveled up a little bit more. And in talking to them, like, yeah, things were rough, but they adapted. And it was pretty awesome going inside their warehouse and seeing how everything was like automated now. They had less employees now, but they had these, like, I want to call it AI, but basically like things that sorted out all their books for them. Where in the beginning when I saw them, it was like a bunch of people just going through stuff and putting them in the right bins, where now it's just going through a conveyor belt, and like this one goes to eBay, this one goes to Amazon, this goes to the bulk buy purchasers, this goes here. And I was like, wow, like this is pretty awesome. And they were huge on Amazon, and I was asking them, like, how's Amazon doing? Like, you guys were killing it. And they're like, actually, Orlando, we've switched over to eBay, and we do better on eBay selling books now. And I was like, what? Like, that's great. That's crazy, right? Because, that's one of the lessons of 2023, I think, for many of us, is that 2023 was brutal. And I think it was very brutal for the people that chose not to adapt. They just kept doing the same thing. They would say, I'm not going to do promoted listings. They would say, I'm not going to source for less. They said, I'm not going to, learn another niche. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And if I don't sell, it's eBay's fault. Well, Latin pickers decided that, hey, even though things got tough on Amazon, even though, they weren't making as much money as they were before, that they were still going to stay profitable. And I think they're actually doing better now than they were back then. But they decided to adapt, right? They put in the work, they invested, they figured it out. And that was very encouraging to me because, I think sometimes we get caught up in the fact that people have been doing the same thing that they've been doing since they started reselling. But the reality is that's not true. Every successful reseller I know has changed either the way they sell, they've changed the platform, they've changed the items they source, they've changed how they list their items. They figured out ways to change because even myself, the way I sell now is not anywhere where it was 2017, 2018, or even this, that was around the time of the podcast. And so it was definitely a highlight to catch up with them, to talk about business, to be with real resellers that had, gone through the struggle, that figured things out and were making it happen. So that was definitely, for me, it was like the highlight of 2023 when it comes to reselling, because it actually caused me to reflect on what I was doing and that I probably need to change things and figure things out. So definitely good.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. I'd love to have gotten together with them one more time before I left. That'd have been cool. It was really neat before I left, though. I did get to see a handful of other resellers and people who've been listening to the podcast, and just got to say goodbye to some people. So that was really cool. But I wish Latin pickers the best, man. Those guys are awesome. So I have one more thing that I'm not going to mention on this podcast, but I'm looking forward to on the next update, kind of talking about. So a little teaser there of a new niche I might be kind of getting into. So make sure that if you're not already subscribed on YouTube, hit that bell notification, subscribe. If you're not subscribed wherever you get your podcast, subscribe there so that you can follow us into 2024 as you hear all of the new exciting things we've got going on. Because man, it's going to be a wild year. I think I'm interested just on how things are going to go in general. So go ahead and follow Pure Hustle Podcast, because we've got no matter what happens, no matter what's going on in the world, we will be reselling nonstop, because that's what we do. Yeah.
Even from the underground bunker.
That's right.
All right. And so, hey, tune in to our next episode. Everyone have a great new year. If you're like, hey, I'm going to take off, that's fine. Take off with your family, rest, relax. But if you're at home and you're bored, list. There are people buying right now. Keep going strong until 2024. With that being said, make sure you be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling.
Peace.